Welcome back to She Asked, Tools for Practical Hope. I am your host, Anna McBride, and I'm so excited that you're here. Today, I am honored to be joined by Dina Fanai. She has performed with and created work for the Trans-Siberian Orchestra, some music I'm very familiar with. She's appeared on Broadway and collaborated on projects connected to Tina Turner, one of my heroes, among many others. Her work lives at the intersection of artistry, power, and emotional depth. Beyond the stage, Dina is also the founder of One Vision Music and Power of Music Global, companies dedicated to using music as a force for good, supporting mental health awareness, disability advocacy, and women's empowerment through concerts, recordings, and educational programs around the world. What makes Dina's work especially compelling is that she's not just creating music, she's creating meaning. Through her immersive project, AVALONA, Dina invites listeners into a mystic, healing landscape where music becomes a pathway to self-discovery, inner guidance, and reclaiming one's voice. Dina, I'm so excited to explore how your artistry, spirituality, and life experience have woven together into the work you're doing now. Welcome to She Asked.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy to connect with you.
Yeah, me too. On this podcast, we like to begin with a story. So I want to invite you to share your origin story, which I don't mean is your resume. I want it to be about your spiritual emergence. So I want maybe share with us about your childhood and early adulthood, how it shaped you as a woman, an artist, and a spiritual being that you are today. So please share with us your story.
I was born and raised in New York City. And from a very early age, I was very connected to music. I always sang. But my path, my life path at that time, starting at 2 years old, I guess I decided I had a path at 2 years old, I was really connected with dance. So I was a ballet dancer from my whole childhood. And that was where I connected, although music was always a huge part of my expression behind closed doors. At a very early age, I could connect to what people felt. And it was beautiful sometimes, but it was very scary to me as well, because I didn't really understand it. And while I was in my whole dance career, which was obviously started training up until 19 years old, I basically was very dedicated to dance and then got very ill and almost lost my life through eating disorders. And that was something, it's kind of, we all understand that as women, whether it goes into an eating disorder or just into kind of that emotional need for perfection and that we all face. So in my late teens, I was very ill. My body was shutting down. And I got to a place where at one point I was not conscious, and I had this presence that came to me and basically said, do you want to live or do you want to die? And if you want to live, this is the choice you have to make, and this is what you have. These are the questions you have to answer. And I chose that I wanted to live. And that was my moment of where I realized how much I was shielding myself and shielding my voice and shielding my sight because it was too painful to see too much or to speak too much, to see too much. And through this kind of experience I had, that was my step onto this journey. I had stopped dance because my body couldn't do it anymore. And I think even more than my body not being able to do it, I think my heart and my spirit couldn't do it anymore. A long story short, because certainly this is a long road, I started using music, started pouring through me, and music was my way back to life. Although I was not a trained musician, I wasn't a trained songwriter, I wasn't a trained piano player, I was a dancer. But I had a keyboard, and I just started writing, channeling stories, songs, the whole journey that I had to go through. Music was my way back, which in a nutshell, that's why what AVALONA is. I don't know if you're familiar with the term jukebox musical, but it's when you have songs and you write a story around it. What AVALONA was my journey, my true journey of healing and self-discovery and recovery. These were the songs that were coming through me as I was going through what I needed to face all of the shadow self, the insecurities, all of the things that were keeping me from stepping into an authentic way of living. Yeah, so music suddenly not only was my path towards healing and self-discovery, but I realized that by sharing these stories, which are very universal, everybody has their own details and specifics, and we know that, and I'm sure with the amount of incredible women you speak to, we all have these stories. One is not more special than the other, but seeing that these are universal fears and that we all face, and very specific ones as women. And I knew that if I could share my story and share my story in my unique way, which was happened to be through song, that I would be able to give other people maybe the courage to share theirs. And we know that when we're honest with our stories, we give each other the permission to be honest with their own, and we can lift each other up. So that's really what AVALONA is. That's what the mission, the vision of AVALONA is on a superficial level. It's a show, it's music, it's a CD, it's like the meditation series, but truly AVALONA itself was my journey, and a journey that I need to share in this life because that's my momentum of kind of moving forward.
Wow.
Process.
What a great story. It's one that really resonates with me because I too have a history of eating disorder. It is, you're right, universal and so prevalent in women's lives, as is this shadow side. And we'll talk about that. So thank you so much for sharing that story. So let's jump right into some questions because I really am very curious. You've said in some things that I've read that our greatest gifts lie beneath our deepest wounds. What does that mean, and how did that truth reveal itself in your own life?
That truth was revealed through a beautiful mentor woman that I met. Her name was Reverend Frankie. It was a Sufi church in Morristown, New Jersey. And when I was just starting out and I was writing these songs of healing, we some way got connected. I don't remember exactly how. And she heard my music and she was like, would you sing at my church? And it was the Sufi church. So it was this beautiful, very divinely like spiritual world where there was just this woman that was in charge of this space. And she would have me come out to Morristown, New Jersey, and she would tell me what her sermon was going to be about and what songs I had written that lived in that world. So this one sermon, she told me this is going to be about grief. And she told me that basically she was talking about her mother. And when she had lost her mother, she realized that her mother gave her the greatest gift that she could ever imagine. And it's where she found, and her greatest gift lied beneath her deepest wounds. And I think for me, like that just hit home so hard. And I had already been on my journey of healing, and I was already working with this incredible woman who I'm still very close with. She was my teacher, my mentor. Her name is Mary, and I'm doing a lot of shamanic kind of Native American work. I'm not journeying, not necessarily involving medicine, but very deep spiritual dream work, energy work, meditation around moving, that finding those places within ourselves. And if you even can imagine or feel into those places within our body that hold this darkness, it's really places that we've disassociated with, that we haven't brought our presence or love into. And just if we can go into those places, that is where our greatest gifts are. And that is where we find when we have any kind of physical or emotional pain, it's when we disassociate and we disconnect and we turn away. But if we're willing to go into them, that is where like life or soul or spirit, our potential is like knocking on that door saying, here, this is the doorway to your greatest gifts. And I feel it, and not that I have mastered it, but I know when I am struggling with something, if I can sit with it and I can move through it on the other side of that pain, that fear, that insecurity, that shadow is where I will continue to find my deeper gifts, and I can continue to help other people have the faith go into those places. So that to me is so huge in everything I do and everything I believe and everything I try to on a daily basis to have enough faith in, that now when I turn away from it, I go, okay, you're doing it. Let's, whether it's not in that moment, it might be later. How can I go into those places because I know it's trying, so there's something behind that.
Listen, I totally understand that a lot of the work that I do with clients is really about first understanding what the wounds are
Yeah.
and then leaning into them as opposed to, as you just described, turning away from them. Because both the solution is there, the healing solution path, as well as you just mentioned, gifts are there. And maybe not the gifts that we would typically describe as such, yet they're really, from a meaningful life standpoint, truly gifts. So, was there a moment when, and maybe you've already said this, but maybe reemphasize it, when you realized that your pain wasn't something to overcome, but something that was shaping your voice?
I don't think there was one specific moment,
Okay.
but when I started seeing that I was able to channel, that I was able to channel this pain and this past that I was such heavy, it was such heaviness upon me that I was able to channel my voice into that and music into that. It started to unfold. It wasn't a moment where I was like, I'm not going to dance anymore because it almost killed me. But I just started seeing, oh my God, this is my path. And it was a process of it opening and showing itself to me.
I like you becoming that version of you.
It's a constant thing. It's when I'm not feeling quite aligned or quite connected, it's like I know it's continuing to find that place where I can go and be authentic in that. So it's a constant process. It's not like I gotta know.
Yeah,
Never.
we do. I always know that healing it's a circular process. We spiral through healing
Spiral.
as opposed to just straight line it.
Yeah.
So when you look back now, what do you understand about your younger self that you couldn't see then?
When I look back upon myself, I see I see a child. It's funny that you brought that up because I just recently got sent a picture of myself of when I was like, I think one of the pictures was like when I was one, and one of them was when I was probably like 2.5 or 3.
Wow.
I just got sent it by my mother the other day, and I was like, and I was looking at it, and I literally was thinking, and I was like looking at this picture while I was
Mhm.
thinking of who is that child, and I used to have so much shame around feeling very passionate about things. Like you would stick me in a pool to try to learn how to swim, and I would be purple and I wouldn't get out until I could swim. I had this crazy drive, but it always made me feel, and it was even actually people in my life, they were not my parents, but that would tell me like, oh, they would make me feel guilty about it. Oh, you
Oh,
would just do anything to get what you want or to do what you want. And it was a place where I just felt so driven and creative. And then it was a place that I turned on myself and thought it was where I was bad and dark. And that was like,
oh,
and it was a very hard thing to, and I still to this day, still sometimes get presented where I'm like so passionate and moving forward. And then I'm like, oh my God, this is where I'm like bad. This is where I'm dark. This is where I could hurt people with this. And so that question led me into this answer. But I think seeing a picture of that child and looking at her, remembering the passion and the magic and the belief in herself
mhm.
before it was
Yeah,
kept away or blocked or
right. I can so relate with that. So I hear a very determined spirit was alive in you at a very young age. I had a similar determination. I wanted to become an Olympic swimmer, so I was definitely chasing that against several odds. However, when you have such a passion for something, and then you hear a message that is contrary towards what your dreams are, what your aspirations are, I think it's very difficult for a young person to know what voice they're supposed to be listening to, the authority outside themselves versus that inner voice, which we'll be talking about shortly about how you cultivate that because that's so important. What I also hear is like you speak so powerfully about the courage, right? That it takes not as fearlessness that a lot of us associate it with, but as a willingness to face fear.
Mhm.
So I want to hear how what that means to you and how has fear shown up in your creative life?
Oh my God, we're best friends. I'm, I think fear, I feel like I've experienced fear in so many different ways.
Okay.
And some of that is the fear of rejection, the fear of success, the fear of failure, the fear of my own self, the fear of my power, the fear of my fragility, the fear of my humanness. I think these are all fears that myself and probably most people experience. But what I started realizing, especially when I was doing the work, when I was doing like a lot of this deep work with Mary, I started seeing how that every once again going back to greatest gifts lie beneath your deepest wounds, I really started seeing that the fear was just not facing it. And I was working with that in dream work. There was once again, I don't want to go too far off the path of talking about the story of Avalona and a lot of the challenges I faced during it, or the story that I was telling about facing your shadow. But there was times that I was internally spiritually terrified and going scared of that darkness and not understanding what is this darkness, and is this darkness bad and evil, or is this just our unconscious and
Mm,
what that is. But as soon as I was able to face it and go into it, it wasn't. I saw, even in, I'll mention one kind of scene in the show, that, and also one that's based on a truth, is there was this figure that used to chase me, like very kind of dark, representing whatever that
mm,
evil is, chasing me. And after months of this reoccurring dream, I just had to keep on trying to be conscious in it and then turn around and face it. And after months of this reoccurring dream, I finally faced it. And I think it was the second to last of the dreams I ever had. I turned around, and this very kind of crazy, scary creature turned into this opossum, oddly. And then it just showed me like your biggest fears are not so scary. The
mm.
final dream was this same person chasing, and I faced, and I said I basically had to stop the presence from chasing me. And then I just hugged him, and he hugged me back, and he said, that's all you needed to do. It was this moment of facing, of really physically facing my fears. So I
Wow.
think there's so many different levels to that question. But
Yeah.
I think all the story that I keeps coming back over and over again is like whether those fears are a scary monster chasing you, or just the fear of what am I doing with my life, and mortality, and who
Mm.
am I, and what, like, it's all the same. It's like, or do we have the willingness to face it? And that is terrifying.
Wow.
I can't deal with it, but that's where neuroses come in. That's where mental health addiction comes in, is when we can't face that. We know that. And so
Right.
now I know from my healing journey that I don't want to go back there. I know I want to continue in having the most beautiful human experience I can. And I know if I don't face it, it's a slippery slope. Once you've seen too much, you can't like put the blinders back on and turn away, because it'll be very painful. Way
Yeah.
more painful than we.
Yeah. We say once you're awake, you can't go back to sleep.
And
You
you try
can't not
sometimes.
be awake. Yes. Yeah. Awareness has a cost. So the cost, here's a question about cost. What did it cost you to keep your voice inside? And what did it give you when you finally let it out?
What did it cost or cause?
What did it cost you to keep it inside when
Did it
when
cost
when
me? It cost me, honestly, it cost me years and years of my life. I never look at it as I lost, because if I did not have this story of addiction and healing, there's no way I would have the gift of what I have now. So I'm so thankful for it. But looking back and seeing how much of my life was spent in such self hatred and shame and hiding, I still come to terms with that. Still, wow, what if? What
Right.
if? But we all have that, what if I knew then what I knew now?
Sure.
So, of course, it almost cost me my life. And I'm so thankful that it didn't, but it shows me how precious it is. and how lucky I am. I get to take that story and take those lessons and take that pain and channel it into something that allows me to have a more beautiful experience in my own life, and then hopefully be able to share it, inspire others, as well as being able to like have deeper connections with people and deeper connections with the work I do, with the earth, and with my relationships.
That's beautiful. I do want to say, like, many of the listeners that we have may be feeling that they've waited too long to begin. So, what would you say to someone who fears it's too late to share their music, their art, or their voice?
If you have one day left on this planet, we don't know. We don't know. We have, as I'm sure you have and people listening, I have lost friends at such an early age that were at such an early age. And then I have my voice teacher who recently passed at 103. So can you imagine being 80 years old and going, what am I going to do for the next 23 years of my life? And so it's taking what you have and taking where you've come from and being able to channel it. And it's like, what have you been hiding? If you are 85 years old and you want to be a professional gymnast, I don't know if that's necessarily the most logical thing, but I think to put time on anything is, I recently heard this saying where dancing timelessly between wisdom and wonder.
Oh,
It's
wow.
so beautiful. And we're always in that. We're always in that place. I think it's never too late. I'm like, at this point in my life, I'm not trying to be a pop star, but I know that we have stories to share and those stories need to be told. That actually is what AVALONA is about. That is, the whole thing is about how we each have a journey, a voice, a vision, and a story to share. And I think actually some of our deepest stories and most beautiful stories are when we're further along in life. That's when we really can share.
Right.
And that's when we have something to share and we can inspire others. So I think it is never too late. There was some list, like a little video of a voice saying this list of people that started like such and such did not write this book till they were 40. This person didn't do their first movie till they were 55. This person didn't write their first screenplay till they were 70. There's not a time limit on love, on story, on inspiring, and on connection.
Thank you for saying that. I'm so biased about this because I'm now 62 and I just started this last year the podcast, and we're all about sharing stories because I think that's why we're here. If we got anything to share, we definitely have a story that we can all grow through from and get inspired by.
God.
So thank you for saying that. All right, so let's jump in and talk about Avalona because it feels like an integration of everything you've lived and learned, right? So why don't you tell us, how did Avalona, a musical legend, come into being?
So back to what we were discussing as far as when I started channeling these songs. And while I was going through my actual journey, wasn't even speaking a lot. It was hard for me at a certain point in my recovery to even speak. Oddly, I was just writing and writing songs. Avalona really was this story that I experienced that I tried for many years. I was like, I know I have to tell this story. I know I need to share this story, but I never knew quite how. I was like, I knew it was like, do I want to write a book? I knew that there was all of this music attached to it, but I wasn't thinking of it as a project. I just knew I needed to share this music, this story, this journey. And so for many years, I would put out music, tons and tons of music. I have 8 albums out. I was like doing lots of concerts. I was working with other artists and I was working with people with disabilities. I was like, how do I use music? Because I know music is such a powerful force. So I had this deep desire and need that compelled me to use music in any way I knew how to, whether it was my own journey or to put it out in the world, to use music to make a difference. So during this whole time, I was writing, but still, how do I tell this story? How do I tell this story? And I was like, I just need to tell this story. And if the songs are part of the story, if I can find a way to like really bring this together and tell it through that way, tell it through almost this, I wasn't necessarily thinking of a show. I didn't really know how, but I was like, I need to tell this story through these songs because these songs tell the story. But then I really, for me, storytelling, as you mentioned, is the most powerful way of connection and healing. I think it's from ancient times. And I was like, if I can tell this story, but in a way that I don't need to get, I'm very open with my story and my eating disorder, but that's not what was important to me. If I get into a deep conversation with someone and I can inspire someone by telling those details, I'm very open with it. But I was like, if I can tell it on a more universal level where I share my story, I share the lessons, I share the choices I had to make and the kind of journey that I had to take on it in a way that others can be inspired to face their own fears, face their own insecurities, face their own shadow, and step into their own potential, then not only am I healing myself in it, but I can give my greatest gift, which is using my own voice to share, to touch others and to connect with others. So that's what AVALONA was, the telling of my story in a universal way through music. And then through many years of doing this, it turned into, there's the meditation series, and it obviously many years of working on the show, and then I wrote an audio book, and because it's so based in truth that it just had all these tentacles where it just needed to keep stretching out. So it's not an actual one thing, but the ultimate core of it is a message, a mission, and like a soul purpose.
So building upon that, I've heard it described maybe in your writings about that AVALONA is a multimedia experience, music, story, movement, ritual. Why is it important that it is more than a traditional performance?
Because I wanted to create an experience, and like I'm talking specifically about in the live show, I feel like in general, there are a lot of different types of theater, and certainly now more and more, everybody's going into immersive. But I feel like especially with the story I was telling, that the only way to really inspire someone to experience their own and put themselves in their own story, on their own path, on their own journey, was to create an environment, a safe environment, to bring them into it as opposed to being a spectator. Not that you can't do that on a proscenium stage, but I felt like if I could really find a way to bring them into a world, they would feel safe enough to experience it in whatever way they felt safe to experience it. And everyone's going to connect on it, whatever level that they're comfortable.
Along those lines, you said AVALONA is not a literal retelling of your life, but an invitation. So what does that mean, and what are you inviting the seeker into?
Actually, can I just say this little bit of poetry that we start with?
Sure.
Which I feel like before I even started AVALONA, it was something that was channeled, and that was something way before the show that I realized what the whole show was about. And this, I think, will answer the question. We each have a journey, a voice, a vision. We are part of something greater, an infinite tapestry. As we each fulfill our destiny, we inspire others to do the same. We find the courage to walk through darkness, giving us the sight and the capacity to hold our own unique light and the strength to shine that light for each other. It is here we rise. May we each experience and remember the truth of who we really are, to fully realize our potential and our magic in connection to Earth. We each have a journey, a voice, a vision. We are legends. The first one is, this legend is just one. So that is what bookends the whole show.
So beautiful. Did you write that?
It was given to me.
Okay.
I wrote it. I physically wrote it, but something,
Wow.
and that's why years later I was like, this is how we start the show. This is what the show
Got
is.
it.
So I don't know if that answers the question.
So you invite them into the experience, they embody it, they can connect with their own, whatever that is that they need to heal. I love that. I really love that. Yeah.
And in the beginning, very close to the beginning of the show, the shaman is kind of behind the lead character, AVALONA, and she's wanting to give up, and she has to make the choice to Basically, she said you have to consciously choose to live, because I think we're here, and then there's at one point where we decide if we not choose to live consciously. I feel like is a little different than consciously choose to live, but we consciously
Yes.
choose to live? Do you choose to love yourself, and are you willing to see beyond the veil of illusion, which keeps you from your true essence, from your
Wow.
and that line is throughout the show. Between each scene, the weaver of time is constantly giving the universal soul lesson of the next song. And we're
Okay.
speaking, so it's species, the weaver of time is speaking to Avalona as well as speaking to the audience. So these are things that you could listen to as pretty poetic text. These are questions that are being asked, hopefully not in an invasive way, not in a therapeutic way, but just constantly planting these
Okay.
questions, these kind of universal questions that allow people to answer for themselves. And at the very end, towards before the
Mm.
very last song, it's the one time of like silence and kind of darkness, and you just say, you now have the choice to live, love, see. So really the whole purpose is taking the seekers on this journey. And listen, some people just come in and they go, oh my God, I love the music, I feel so good,
Yeah.
who
Uh,
and then other people are crying. It's like people
yeah.
connect to things in different ways. It's not for
Right.
everyone, but the whole point is, how can I take someone on their own journey when they walk out, where maybe they just have a little more courage to
Mm.
face something, or to step out and do something they haven't done, or to love deeper, or to cry harder, or to, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter, because that's not for me to answer. But so
Right.
so it's really about them.
Nice. Wow. That's quite an invitation. You mentioned earlier that Avalona asks people to confront their shadows. Why do you believe we avoid that? And what becomes possible when we don't?
What becomes possible when we don't confront it?
No, when we
When
don't avoid it.
we don't. So what is scary about it? Everything. It's
Yeah.
terrifying. It is the ugly stuff in us, but it's not. It's ugly when we're not facing it. It's the judgment and darkness in ourselves that we project out into the world. But it's like we all have this, it's a humanness. It's a humanness that I think we all struggle with. There's anger and there's shame, and how those feelings, and usually these feelings come from cutting ourselves off from like our deepest intuition and our voice. That's where
Right.
the anger comes in. It's like anytime I've had to face this, it's like the anger that I've had in myself, I would project outwards. The shame I had in myself, the protect. That is my puppy. I apologize. It's these are the more that we have to protect ourselves, and usually we have to protect ourselves when we're not being authentic, because
Mm.
I don't even know why I thought about this right now, but I did. There's I'm going to segue off to another little path story. But I spoke to a organic farmer once, and he was talking about, if you're talking about like a farm and vegetables with pesticides on them, not
Right.
only are the pesticides dangerous, the pesticides are, because the soil wasn't fertile and the soil wasn't healthy, the plant, the organism isn't strong enough to protect itself. So the actual organism isn't even healthy, and it needs the protection and the poison to cover up, to
Wow.
protect the unhealthy, non-healthy core of an immune system of that. I've never even made this analogy before,
Wow.
but how interesting that the anger, the poison, is the protection of where we can't fully be integrated and authentic.
Yeah. Yeah. What I hear in that, Dina, is that we all have these vulnerable parts of ourselves, right? From wounds from our experience. And I think that what I hear you saying is that when we don't lean into them, when we don't face them, those may be our shadows, depending on how deeply we've pushed them down into our subconscious, right? Or our unconscious. That when we don't look at that stuff, we are leaning on these protectors to keep us safe, because our bodies, our nervous systems at least, are designed to keep us safe. And it can look like anger, and it can look like this false sense of an ego, right? And whatever that looks like, right? It's not authentic, as you said. And I think that's the invitation to face the shadow, those
Mhm.
parts of us that are very vulnerable, and do the healing work so that we can lay down those protectors or at least talk to them and saying, thank you, I've got it from here. Yeah, it's really quite interesting.
I saw this video recently. I'll text it to you. It was this image of this woman. It was animated. It was of this woman facing her shadow, and it was this very dark, like
Mm,
skeleton, like monster. And she just looked at it, and she walked over and she held it. Oh my God, I'm gonna get choked up. And it just slowly turned into this her child. It was,
wow.
and it just was, it turned into a, like her baby, her holding her, like
Yeah.
her inner child. And I feel like that's our shadow is only as big as we resist it.
Yeah. Or as scary as
It's
we
scary, absolutely.
It's so interesting. I read you mentioned that you were surprised how deeply Avalona or this whole program resonates with teens and Gen Zs. So, what do you think they're
Very.
responding to?
I think the live performance, especially in the beginning, Avalona, you first see her as a child, as like a 10, 12-year-old child, and she's connected with the horse, which the horse represents our instinctual right to truth and freedom that we suppress, that the shadow suppresses as we grow. And you see these kind of voices that, like, as the shadow walks in, you just hear, you're not good enough, you need to be better. All of these, like, very common internal voices that we have, and certainly that children coming of age, teenagers, young adults, are feeling like this social pressure. And then you see her as an adult, like where these small voices and whispers turn into this, like, this
Mm,
spiral, like, of shame and just voices like attacking. And I think that so resonates with how we, so like how we clearly can watch somebody being tormented by these internal voices. And I had children, like, there were like 6 year olds and 8 year olds that oddly connected to it, but a lot of teens and young
mm,
adults that they were like, oh my God, I felt so alone. I didn't know other people felt like that. I didn't know other, and I'm like, oh my God, everybody feels like that. And I think just putting something so clearly in front of them, going, especially at that time in their life where they're
yeah.
trying to fit in and you're trying to fit
Mm,
in with society, and you're also just in a place where you're coming out of this time when you did believe in yourself, you did believe in magic, you did see through the veil of illusion that we have to
yeah.
block a little bit as we get older and protect ourselves until we have to find it again. But so I
Yeah.
think it really resonated, going, oh my God. And this is seeing how deeply we hurt ourselves, and how by hurting ourselves, we hurt each other, and how deeply when we see how when we heal, we help each other. So I think seeing it physically, you're seeing a child and an adult, like the how that kind of shame and that kind of pressure we put on ourselves. So I think that's a big thing, as well as seeing these archetypes that I think they connected with. A lot of kids in Gen Z live in the gaming world and video games. So when they see these kind of beautiful archetypes, they can see how they can role play in these worlds, and they're able to see different aspects of themselves in not a, let's say, therapy setting.
Yeah. Wow. That's great. It's so good because I think about to see art functioning as a doorway, right? As a doorway into conversations and conversations around mental health and identity. How do you see that happening within the work that you're doing?
I think this whole story, the arc of Avalona, is really about coming to terms with your own identity. And I think that is just evident in the story and evident in the way that we allow others to experience it. The message kind of permeates through the whole arc of the story and the show.
Wow, it's great. Like the conversations that can come out of just watching the performance already has so many layers that can lead towards other conversations and how these obstacles or these challenges show up in the individual's lives.
Mhm.
That's a great vehicle. I think so many women, or even when we're talking about young adults, they're so much able to see themselves in settings that are as you said, both futuristic or animated or different archetypes that they're so non-linear in their thinking,
Yeah.
which is such a gift. It's such a gift because I don't know exactly when it happened, but it certainly happened for a lot of the adults my age that you become very linear, very flat line in terms of how you see the world functioning. There's a black and white as opposed to multiple dimensional experiences. So I can understand. I just think that's a great way to talk about that, particularly when we're talking about topics like mental health and even identity, which is such a huge topic in that generation. It's great. It's
And
great.
really, what is obviously there's so many, yeah, there's so much of a conversation around like identity. What is that? And regardless of what your beliefs are in anything, certainly there's so much around self identity. But identity is about finding that authenticity within yourself, regardless of definition of anything. But it's that identity starts with your relationship to yourself. There's so much attention put to like how the world sees us, like regardless to have that find that space where we can find that authentic connection with ourselves, then choose what we want to do with it. And how I know for me, most of my life had nothing to do with my connection with myself. It had to do with how everybody saw me, how I wanted to be seen, and would have done anything to protect it.
I agree with you. I think what's interesting, since we're talking about this, the teenagers or the Gen Zs, is that they're, as a generation, far more capable of really voicing this struggle that they're having and their strong desire to maintain a connection to self. And then our society then challenges that or makes that wrong or makes that selfish or whatever label they want to put on it. And I think had I had that kind of generational advocacy, who knows, I may not have struggled as much or as long. And so I really see them as quite the pioneers
Oh,
of getting
absolutely.
that.
And you keep mentioning the voice. It's like finding and being able to voice that. It's even with, you had mentioned you had an eating disorder as well, but so much about the eating disorder is like stifling your voice.
Yes.
Now it's so beautiful is that we are inspiring the next generation to voice and I think through that is where we're able to start having deeper conversations and deeper connections.
Talk about permission. Like that's really the big part, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's
Things
great.
were not talked about the same.
No, no.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing you say when you're sharing about your life's lessons, I hear a few arcing themes. One is our wounds hold our gifts. Another one is when the heart breaks, it breaks open. Yeah. And then the third one is don't die with the music inside you. Which one of those feels most alive for you right now and why?
Right now, don't die with your music inside. I think they're all part of it, but I think it's so easy to get tired. For me anyway, it's like I'm just constantly working, trying to put stuff out. And it's not so much like physically tired. Does it really matter? Having that feeling like, oh my God, does it really matter? Do I really need to get this? Is it just, I'm adding just something else to the list of something of like things I want to do and things I want to accomplish? And going to know this is what keeps me alive. And if no one else hears it, like you said, is anyone too old? No, don't die with music inside.
There
And
you go.
so I think right now that, especially as like where I put out all of this, we did the run and all this stuff. And then what is it? 10 steps forward, sometimes 20 steps back, but going like, just keep on sharing, whether that is me sitting by myself at the piano or just having enough courage to get to the next step of it. So I think that's the one that's resonating at this moment.
Okay. So let's talk about 2026 and what's next for you.
Okay.
You've had a successful off-Broadway run, and now you're looking toward, as I understand it, residencies, touring, and working with schools and universities. So why does sharing this work with young people feel so important to you?
Oh God, what we've been talking about, I'm just so excited to share this work with that generation as well as to really learn from them. Like we did a couple of Q&As after our show in this run with schools, seeing how it affected them and seeing the questions they had and the characters that they identified with. So I think it'll teach me about the journey of AVALONA. It's like AVALONA to me is not something like it's done every single day. Like last night, I just came up with this aha moment going, oh my God, I didn't even realize that about that character. Wow. This is constant. So the more I can learn about it through sharing it, the more it can grow in its own journey. And I think sharing it with students and sharing it will teach me about the piece of work and AVALONA's journey, as well as I feel like it has such a strong message that can really touch and inspire others, especially if we're going to be touring it, I think, with anyone of that age, but also sharing it with theater departments and music departments to really give people giving students in a career that is very confusing now that music is not worth anything as far as you can't sell it, and still giving kids that are artists that have so much passion about sharing their art, but not knowing how to do it. Not that I have the answer, but showing students in like non-traditional ways how in your unique voice, you have something to say, and all bets are off as far as the right way to release something and the way things are done and the way things work, because no one knows how that is anymore. So I think giving students kind of the courage to tell their stories in their own unique ways is a really important message, as opposed to learn this and then join an orchestra. That is not the answer anymore.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, that's really very cool. Now, I understand that you're also releasing the full album in audiobook, possibly as a series or a podcast, which is exciting to hear. What excites you about expanding AVALONA into new formats?
Oh, I'm just so excited about the audiobook. It's narrated, so it goes very in depth of detail in a much more fantastical way, but it is all based in truth. So I think especially now with the way people experience content, it's like a lot of things are just people experience it online, in gaming. And I feel like because the kind of story and the message is so clear, the way that its genres are very fluid. So whether it is the audiobook or the show or the meditation series, I feel like this is a way to going back to creating a world, which I'm so excited about, where I'm working with this incredible visual artist that is helping us create a 2.5-hour long film associated with the audiobook. So I think I'm so excited. Obviously, I think in a business sense, I think you have to find ways of leveraging these different assets to gather audience. So that I think is a smart thing. But for me, I get so excited to explore these different mediums and these different genres to tell the same story and to share the same message.
That's very cool. I can't wait for the game, AVALONA, the game.
I'm so excited about that. And I feel like that's not like right here, although with my team, we've already started to explore what that would look like. But these are the things that like down the road, I think right now with the show, the audiobook, the meditation series and the cast, I think those are the assets that are already created. But that's something I'm super excited about when the time is right.
Yeah. Oh, you're going to really connect with the younger generations that way. Maybe some of us older ones that love that.
Absolutely. And using gaming, because I think what's also happened, especially since the pandemic, it's like so much of this generation started using gaming and going online for isolation and finding a way creating a world where we inspire connection, not isolation, that there's a place even physically where you can come and be part of something, inspiring connection through a game like this, through the gaming aspect of it, even if it's not necessarily a video game.
Wow. Incredible. Now you mentioned about reconnecting with horses, even the horse character in the show. This feels symbolic. So what is that calling forward in you, the horse?
When I was young, when I was still dancing, I think I started going when I was about 7 or 8. I would be in these dance workshops, but I was always very connected to horses, even though I grew up in New York City, so I was always wanted to go have a pony ride or go see the horses or visit the horses. So I would spend 2 weeks every summer and I'd go work with horses on a farm. It was a horseback riding like camp because you weren't allowed to be a ballet dancer and ride horses because it was like the wrong muscles.
Okay.
I started exploring, and that's also where I had my first experience where I saw spirit ghost of a horse.
Wow.
And that specific experience is what the character is.
I see.
Over the last couple of years, I've been really wanting to connect to horses again, especially as I'm exploring this character and my truth in it. Because I wasn't doing healing work with them when I was little. It was just a connection I had. But the healing that horses can inspire, just because from what I know and like intuitively and what I've seen, it's when you're working with horses, they're like a mirror helping you find that authentic self. And I think that is something that no matter how far I've come on my journey, I am always dodging. And so I don't know, I just have this deep need to start working with horses again. And actually on Thursday, I'm working with this amazing man and his horses on Thursday for the first time after exploring it for a year.
Good for you. That's awesome. That's awesome. So here's a final question.
Okay.
If someone listening feels disconnected from their voice, creatively, spiritually, or emotionally, what is one gentle place where they can begin to reconnect?
I think in the silence. I think for me, what I've noticed is as soon as I start losing my voice, if I stop and center and connect and listen, sorry, speaking of voice.
Rumi wants to be heard.
Rumi wants to be heard. I think there was a mailman outside. I apologize. I think so much about your voice is being able to hear your voice. And I think, like for me, the time that I ever, like the strongest I ever heard my voice is when I took myself on a silent retreat.
Okay.
And whether that doesn't mean you have to go into a silent retreat, but I think stopping and sitting, and sometimes meditation is a scary word for people that haven't meditated because they're like, I can't stop but I think finding, and it might not necessarily be meditation, maybe it's walking, but giving yourself the space to hear your voice, I think is the most important thing. And that might be through putting music on and dancing. It might be through just taking a journal out. But I feel like it's finding a safe space where you can hear your voice.
Okay.
Is probably what I would suggest, when everybody has their own way. So I wouldn't.
Yeah, but connecting with that voice in whatever way that is. And I think it's interesting that you said through the silence, because
The silence.
there's so much noise in our city, right? I live in New York City also, in our city, in our heads, in our
heads, that's
society, right?
louder than New York City.
Right. Yeah, sure. So learning how to get to that stillness or silence so that we can actually hear the quiet, gentle voice versus the loud, right? Fearful voice. Oh, that's great. I really love that. So that's great guidance. So I want to thank you again, Dina Fanai, for joining us on the She Asked podcast. If our listeners want to get a hold of you or learn more about Avalona, how would you direct them to do that?
I would say go to AVALONA Music. So it's like on Instagram at AVALONA Music, AVALONA Music. Or you could go for the show, it's AVALONAimmersive.com. For more of the music, AVALONAmusic.com. But there's lots of ways. And we will be doing an immersive concert, not the full show, but immersive concert at the Lincoln Center Atrium on February 21st. So that's our next thing. And please come. Come and
please provide us with that information. We'll make sure we put it in the notes so that people can get the information. I can't wait to hear more about that. So thanks again, Dina, for joining us on She Asked, the podcast where healing meets practical hope. I've been the host, Anna McBride, and until soon, as we always say, be well.
Goodbye, Anna. Thank you.